meeting of Stirling Council. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube, and a recording will be available on the website after the meeting. Firstly, a brief reminder of the protocol. Elected members and senior officers should activate their cameras. All attendees should mute their microphones and keep them mute throughout the meeting when not speaking. When invited to speak, you should switch your microphone on and switch it off when you have finished. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand button on the panel on your screen and remove it when you have finished. Could officers who are invited to speak please state their name and job title? Members must not attempt to speak until invited to do so by myself. We will be observing the time limits set out in standing orders, mainly 5 minutes for proposing a motion, 3 minutes for seconding a motion, and 3 minutes for summing up. Also, members will be allowed 2 questions each, and a follow-up question will count as a second question. I will now hand over to the clerk to take the roll call. Julia.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Benison.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Benny.
I'm here.
Councillor Beryl.
Present.
Councillor Brisley.
I'm here.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Dodds.
Present.
Councillor Errol.
Present.
Councillor Farmer.
Present.
Councillor Flanagan.
I'm here.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Houston.
I'm here.
Councillor Hutchison.
Present.
Councillor Kane.
Here.
Councillor Laurie.
Present.
Councillor McPherson.
Here.
Councillor Majuri.
Present.
Councillor MacDonald.
Here.
Councillor McGill.
Present.
Councillor Oxborough.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Tolamash.
Yes, I'm present.
And Councillor Tweed.
Present.
Thank you, Provost. All members are present this afternoon.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Tweed.
Thanks, Provost. Just for the record, I am also the MSP for Starling.
Thank you. We now move to item 3, which is the General Fund Revenue Budget and Determination of Council Tax for 2022-23, and we have a report by the Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you, Provost. George Murphy, Interim Chief Officer Finance. This report sets out the background to the budget for 22-23 and identifies a budget surplus of 0.441 million after taking account of cost pressures, budget mitigations and confirmed government grant. The local government finance settlement in December 2021 confirmed a flat cash grant settlement for the council for 22-23 after deducting new ring-fence monies for health and social care and education. It is proposed in the report that the additional health and social care funding be passed over in full by the council to the Health and Social Care Partnership. In addition to the December grant announcement, in January 2022, the Scottish Government confirmed a further £120 million of funding to local government for 22-23. This funding is, however, one-off in nature, with no expectation that it will be baselined in the local government grant beyond next year. The Council currently has confirmation of grant funding for 22-23 only, although the Scottish Government has announced its intention to provide a multi-year finance settlement following the resource spending review in May 2022. In relation to council tax, the report refers to the recommended planning assumption of a 3% increase. However, as outlined in the local government finance settlement, councils now have full flexibility to set the council tax rate that is appropriate for their local authority area. The report also confirms the outcome of a recent exercise undertaken by officers to review all existing commitments against earmarked reserves, with the purpose of identifying those reserves that can potentially be repurposed towards other priorities. Reference is also made to the ongoing impact of COVID-19 on the Council's financial situation. Available COVID funding continues to be actively managed, being deployed as required to support additional cost and income loss areas. The report also makes reference to the draft 5-year budget outlook and confirms that significant financial challenge lies ahead. Meeting this challenge will require a substantial amount of work by both officers and elected members. In line with the Council's 10-year strategy and target operating models, many of their future service changes will be of a significant transformational nature and will require upfront investment to support their delivery. The Council is invited to discuss and decide on the budget proposals already circulated by the administration. Opposition and independent amendments have also been circulated in advance, setting out alternative budget proposals. At this point, I am happy to answer any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to the officer? Councillor Bennison.
Thanks, Provost. I wanted to ask George, on page 6, 2.23, the employer's national insurance. It's in the report that this hasn't been passed over to Scottish councils yet. Can you confirm if this has been passed over to Scottish councils to date?
Thank you, Councillor Benson. No, it hasn't been passed over to Scottish councils. It did go to English authorities as outlined in the report, but the Scottish Government has not passed that on to local authorities across Scotland. So for Stirling Council, the impact of that is about £800,000 to the general fund as outlined in the report, and a smaller amount, £60,000 for HRA. So we've built provision into the budget for 22-23 to meet these additional costs.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions? No. I believe we have a motion. Councillor Brisley?
Sorry, yes, Provost. I have the motion has been circulated and I'm presenting the motion on behalf of the administration.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Provost, I'll second the motion.
Right. I think we'll hear the motion before we move on to any amendments. Councillor Brisley, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. I'd first of all like to thank the staff, especially Mr. Murphy and his team, for all the help and support I've received in the preparation of this budget. It's once again been a very challenging exercise in very difficult times for us all. Mr. Murphy has highlighted the position facing local authorities very ably in his report to Council. Although the overall level of funding to local authorities has increased in cash terms, much of the increase is to fund specific areas determined by the Scottish Government to fund their priorities, mainly in health and social care and children and young people services. It was highlighted by COSLA that the level of funding for Council's core services was not sufficient to protect local services, far less improve them. For the first time that I can ever recall, there was unanimous agreement among all the political parties in COSLA on this point, and strong representations were made by the 32 council leaders to the Scottish governments. In response to the representations, a meeting took place with the First Minister, and after this meeting, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Economy announced a further allocation of non-recurring funding for next financial year, and Stirling's share of this was £2.084 million. It's also been acknowledged by the Accounts Commission that local government share of the overall Scottish budget has been decreasing. In 2007-2008, the percentage share was 28.62. In 2022-23, it's now down to 22%. There's continuing uncertainty for the future, and there are no guarantees of future funding, as Mr. Murphy said. Hopefully, that may change and we might get a better idea when, I think it's May, that the Scottish Government is intending to publish settlements for the 24 to 25 period. Mr. Murphy has given us a very good outline of the risks, the budget pressures and the financial measures taken by officers to mitigate these challenges. I'm not going to repeat all of this information, but I think we're all aware of the continuing impact that COVID is having on both the council and our communities. We're also facing much increased energy prices, with more price rises to come if the reports are accurate. Food prices are rising, as are other essential commodities. In essence, many of our communities are struggling, and people are facing the choice of eating or heating. And it's with all these problems in mind that the budget discussions took place. We did also take account of the budget consultation exercise that took place. Although we are not constrained by the level increase we are allowed to levy, the administration were very keenly aware of the challenges our community are facing, and the decisions on the level of increase was not taken lightly. Through the careful management of the council finances, there's a very healthy level of reserves, above the 2 to 2.5 level of budget, percentage of budget set by council last year. The reserves are currently forecast to be about 4.1% of the budget, or 9.4 million. But as the future is so uncertain, we are not intending having a spending spree with the reserves. As the future is so uncertain, but we intend to keep them for some expenditure is foreseen, but for other unforeseen expenditures. Although we still have COVID monies available to us, the signs are still there that this is going to be required. And also, there's no guarantees of any future COVID money. I must thank the officers for the work they've done in further scrutinising the earmarked reserves to determine if there was any scope to utilise reserves from this source. A sum of 1.958 million has been identified that we intend to use to try to assist families struggling so badly at this time. This is one-off expenditure to help people at a time of absolute desperate need. So hopefully it will ease the pressure on those facing the greatest challenges. I'm proud of what we are proposing today to help those most in need. I was part of an administration in the 1980s, when the administration I was part of then was able to give as much assistance to struggling minors and their families as we were legally entitled to do. Even more people are struggling at the moment, as we're struggling at that time. So the support we're offering will be invaluable to many. As you can see from Appendix 3, we propose to enhance the Scottish Child Bridging payments made during school holiday weeks to help those children in receipt of school meals. Another help will be the increase in the school clothing grant from £130 for primary children and £150 for secondary children to £200 for both groups. There's also a sum allocated for school leavers to gain work in the care experience sector. We've asked this, hopefully, We know there's a crisis in care at the moment, and hopefully it may encourage some young people to look for a career in this area. And we have asked officers to look at baselining this into next year's budget. We're also allocating funding to enhance out-of-school care projects. There's a fuel support payment of £100 to those households receiving other benefits to help them cope with the pressures of rising energy bills. The Scottish Welfare Fund top-up further provides even more help for those on low incomes with the provision of community care grants and crisis grants. A food fund, this will help organisations both within and out with the council to help in this area. Support for food banks. We all know within our communities the excellent work going on there. So there's funding to help that. Those are the main ones giving support to those in greatest need. There are some other projects included to encourage people to be more active. We want to help people and have more active travel. So there's upgrade work for some of our coast paths around the area to make walking a better and more enjoyable experience, and hopefully encourage more for this. There's creation of an adult gym in a couple of locations, upgrade work at a park in Dunblane, provision of new toilets at Plain Country Park. Plain Country Park's a well-used area by walkers, and they've started a park run. As the toilets are very badly run down and also very far from other facilities, we felt that this would be a good use of funding and hopefully encourage even more work, but more people to use the park. There's public realm works, improvements in the city centre, and investment in new technology to support enforcement activities. We have got those are all the one-off items. There are some recurring growth items, additional support for graduates, apprenticeships. That we think is vitally important. If it can be, we're having difficulty in some areas trying to get staff. So hopefully we can grow our own in that context. There's also funding for the revenue impact of prudential borrowing, rural communities fibre broadband. This will be a huge benefit in both our eastern and western rural schools and libraries, who haven't as yet been part of the previous infrastructure works. With the growth in online learning, it was found that the service was proving to be unreliable, and that can't happen when it comes to young people's learning. It'll also be a benefit to local businesses because British Telecom intend to enable the local BT exchanges to provide a full fibre service through BT. So hopefully local businesses can benefit as well. It's not been an easy task, as we're all aware of the pressures facing people. It's very much been a balancing act of what is affordable and providing assistance to those facing the most pressure. I'm therefore happy to propose the administration motion, and you see in the outline, the main part is a total budgeted expenditure of 2.46.569 million, as detailed in Appendix 1, a Band D council tax of 1384.58 be set, which equates to a 3% council tax, as recommended by the officers that was felt to be necessary, and it's detailed in Appendix 1. Although we've got a large amount of reserves, we know that the transformation work that will allow savings for the future to be made has to be taken into account. And Finance and Economy last week deferred a decision on the transfer of further resources into that fund. And the report is coming to a very soon council meeting after the elections, outlining all the various projects that are taking place. So we know monies will be required for transformation. So with that, I'm happy to move recommendations 1 to 14 in the motion as contained, as you already have a copy of. So with that, I'm pleased to move this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie, you're seconding the motion. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I'm happy to second, Provost. I reserve my right to speak at the moment. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We have an amendment proposed by Councillor Davis and seconded by Councillor Majuri. Councillor Davis, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I would. After nearly 5 years as a councillor, it's a great privilege to be able to introduce an amendment. I'm very grateful to Councillor Majuri for seconding this and making it possible. An election year is never a good time to raise taxes. In fact, raising taxes is never a good idea, ever. However, the reality is that we have no choice. I'll tell you why. 2007, the SNP gained power in Holyrood. Then GDP per head in Scotland was £25,000. By 2020, it had risen to £30,000 per head, an increase of 7%. That sounds fantastic. But that is until you learn that GDP per head in the UK in that period rose 3 times faster, by 22%. And the UK, of course, includes Scotland. So that means the GDP of the non-SNP governed parts of the UK grew even faster than that. This is not the forum to discuss the reasons why Scotland has grown more slowly than the rest of the UK. But massive allocations of cash to failed shipyards, airports, fabrication yards and aluminium smelters is a pretty good place to start. The SNP government seems unable to see a lame duck without running towards it with bucket loads of cash. And that cash has come at the expense of local government. As the officers detail in paragraph 2.4 on page 3, the allocation of funds from Holyrood to local government has fallen from 29% of the budget in 2007 to 22% this year, as Councillor Grizzly has already referred to. And this is where the constant rhetoric of independence comes up against the hard maths of finance. As the SNP has argued for more powers over finance, it has been granted them, so that over time, the percentage of what it raises becomes ever more dependent on the Scottish economy. Increasingly, in economic terms, Scotland has to eat what it kills. But as we've just seen, the SNP economy is growing more slowly than the rest of the UK.
Councillor Davis, sorry, can I ask you to stick to your plans, your proposals for the budget?
Yes, I'm coming to that. I want to give the background as to why we are putting those proposals in there.
Well, you have a limited time to speak, so I think
I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
Proposals, thank you.
So not only does it have to increasingly fend for itself, it also has to replace what it is losing as the Barnett formula becomes a less important part of Scottish government funding. This is done through the block grant administration indexation. It means, and I quote from the House of Commons briefing paper 7386, it allows for the devolved administrations to face the consequences of the policies they adopt using the devolved powers. To deal with this double whammy, Holyrood is giving less money to local authorities. That is why Stirling's allocation for the SNP is down in cash terms. In the meantime, our infrastructure is crumbling before our very eyes. 2 bridge failures in less than a year. My ballpark estimate is that they are costing the local economy in my ward about £2 million a year in lost revenue from cafes, bed and breakfast, and extra freight costs from the likes of Jimmy Bilston's oil tankers, having to take a 10-mile detour on every trip to the east of Croftunny. Let alone the additional mileage.
You have 2 minutes left, so I suggest you get down to your specific proposals.
I will. These 2 bridges will cost £1.25 million to repair. We have 90 bridges. And remember, 1% on the council tax only raises £500,000. Unless we have a proper funded and maintained network of roads and IT, our economy will never function at its optimum capacity. We need to invest to grow. If the SNP won't give us the money, we have to raise it ourselves. And that is what this amendment proposes. Thank you.
Thank you. This amendment has been seconded by Councillor Majuri. Councillor Majuri, do you wish to speak?
I second the motion and reserve my right to speak at the moment.
Thank you. We have a second amendment moved by Councillor Benny, seconded by Councillor Errol. Councillor Benny, would you like to move your amendment?
Yes, Provost, thank you. The budget that is before us is one of is obviously one of the big set piece events of the year, and it would be remiss of me not to point out what's already been pointed out in terms of the growing reduction in the amount of money which local government has to operate, which has been written about from COSLA, written about nationally, and indeed is reflected in the papers that we have here before us today. Until we have a government that values local government, then we will continue to be in a position where we are constantly looking to either raise taxes or cut services. And that is not a good position for any local leaders to be in. And it limits the ability of local government to be able to operate and to do what it needs to do. Our budget amendment today, because actually we find ourselves in accord with the administration on much of what they're proposing, but we have two specific things that we want to do, which is different from how the administration have presented their budget. The first of which is to mitigate against the administration's continuing decision where it will levy a £35 charge on garden waste pickups in the Starling area. We believe this is a fundamentally unfair thing to do. It discourages people from keeping gardens, and it is fundamentally an unfair tax, extra tax on bins, which is fundamentally wrong. And we don't agree with it. We didn't agree with it last year. We don't agree with it this year. And we have put money aside to reverse it this year, to set the fee at zero permanently. I understand we can't actually scrap the fee because we're still within 6 months of the last time we tried to do that, but we can set it at zero. So it would have the same impact, whereby nobody would be charged for keeping garden waste in their, for putting garden waste in their brown bins. Moving to the one-off policy growth items that the administration has put forward, I did find it quite interesting. Councillor Brisley talked about not having a spending spree when there was a spending spree. There's a lot of spending commitments here, many of which I actually think there's a lot of merit in. I think there's a lot to be discussed about them. I think I'd like to know more about them. I think they would benefit from further scrutiny. But more importantly, I think that fundamentally we have to change the way that we're dealing with these things. The £2 million windfall, which has effectively been discovered through the work done at the Audit Committee with regards to the earmarked reserves, in terms of finding lots of earmarked reserves which were no longer necessary. And I still think there's probably more of those earmarked reserves which are in the officer papers, which would stand further scrutiny in terms of being able to release them and to make sure they're spent. That raises this £2 million, which has been spent in the way that the administration has put forward on page 7 of their motion. I believe that we need to look at the General Fund Revenue Reserve as well. For years now, we've been told by officers that it's important that we keep our reserves above the position that the council has agreed that reserves should be at, which is 2.5%, which is prudent and right. That is 2.5%, and we keep being told that it is prudent to keep those reserves above those values in a situation where there are several significant issues that the council is dealing with in terms of the cost of living crisis, in terms of the environmental the environmental and nature emergency, climate and nature emergency that has been declared by this council, and in terms of the need to transform the way the council works into the future. I think it's important that we have a process for investment in this. And what I have done in my amendment is demonstrate how that can be done possibly, because what that would allow the issues which have been identified on page 7 in terms of the food fund, the welfare fund, top up, the cost of living support fund, to go through a process of scrutiny to make sure that the money is getting to the right place in the right way, and that we're getting assurance that council taxpayers' money is being spent effectively against those objectives. and also to expand that to cover issues of transformation, because I think we need more oversight of that. We need to be more open about what we're wanting to spend that money on, and also to include issues around about the environmental emergency which we've declared. Because I don't see that being addressed in this budget. And I think it is important that we have the ability to put funding into that. Because when you put the two things together, say, for example, if we were to invest in a project to improve home insulation, that would improve our environmental footprint. It would also improve our ability to manoeuvre with regards to the cost of living crisis. Because while our housing budget deals with the 5,500 council houses we have, and we've got a good insulation programme there, and that was approved a few weeks ago, and a good solar panel programme, we don't have a commensurate thing for the private sector houses, which make up a further 30,000 of the households in the Stirling area. Many of the people who live in those houses can't afford to do the kind of insulation improvements that we need to do. So we need targeted support for that kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing that stands scrutiny, worked out projects and considered action, rather than, oh, well, we'll have an idea, we'll stick it in and then we'll work it out later. Let's work it out first, then spend the money. I am in agreement with the administration about much of what they've got there, and our group is in agreement with that. But fundamentally, we need to have a more analytical and data-based approach to what we're spending our money on, because it's not our money. It's the money of the people of Starling, and we need to make sure that that money is being spent in the most effective way. Furthermore, we have also allocated money for a capital programme, more money than what the administration has. That's to support additional road improvements, especially around about pavements, which are massively underinvested in the Starling area because of the way that we allocate funds. We need to allocate more money to that. We've done that in our capital programme. And we've also stuck to the 3%. I think a 3% council tax rise is high at this stage, but I think it's probably necessary to be able to ensure the long-term financial stability of the council. So we do find ourselves in a large degree of agreement with the administration, but we also find that the way that the administration has presented this, the way that the administration is undertaking, especially these one-off policy growth items, we don't like the fact that this is coming up without analysis, without worked out plans. This feels not worked out. And I think it would stand to be a little bit more scrutinised and a little bit more considered. And that's why we put forward the amendment that we put forward today. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Arrow, I believe you've seconded this amendment. Do you wish to speak?
I have, Provost. Thank you. I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to open this up to debate. Who would like to speak? Councillor Farmer.
Yes, thank you, Provost. You know, yes, we recognise that local government is going through significant financial challenges and has done for many years. But what we also need to take cognizance of is a Tory Chancellor who has been woeful in terms of facing up and providing funding, especially for the most vulnerable, in terms of the cost of living crisis. So what we're seeing here is the Tories' perfect storm. Spiralling energy costs, rising national insurance contributions, cuts to universal credit, and the reduction in the Scottish Block grant, in real terms down by 5.6%. And on top of that, we're seeing the effects of Brexit coming in and affecting price rises and affecting the cost of living crisis and fueling that cost of living crisis. So what we're seeing is the Tories' perfect storm, and Councillor Benny has come up with nothing in terms of dealing with it, which again shows the callousness of the Tories. When the mask slips, you see where their priorities lie, and it certainly isn't with the most vulnerable in our society. The Tories talk about their investment fund. We've got general reserves there for specific reasons. For unforeseen circumstances like the bridges collapse that Councillor Davis referred to is a perfect example, but also monies there that are above the reserve limits to actually drive through transformation in this council to realise savings in the future so that we can have a sustainable approach to delivering services for our communities. So I welcome, in the face of the cut in the block grant, in the face of the rising energy costs and the NI rises and the effects of Brexit, I welcome the initiatives that the administration has put forward. I also welcome the £120 million extra that came from the Finance Secretary in the local government settlement, and I will certainly be arguing for that, or much of that, to be baselined in the coming years. But that is a fight for another day. Now, what I would say is that in terms of Councillor Berry's window dressing of Stirling Investment Fund and a lack of the lack of clarity in terms of what he is proposing in terms of cost of living crisis. A crisis is a crisis, Councillor Benny, and that's why we need concrete financial proposals and costings now for our struggling communities. You have produced nothing but window dressing. And there's been considerable work, and I would like to thank officers for their considerable work across these options, where they have looked at these, they have worked them through, they have went through the analysis that Councillor Benny obviously is looking for, kicking the whole issue down to the long grass. And also, I'd like to take into account that the consultations that we were being undertaking in terms of the effects of COVID on our communities was also factored in terms of how we could target those monies to those most in need. So I am proud of an administration that is actually taking action rather than bluster, Councillor Benny, and actually having costed firm proposals to alleviate much of the cost of living crisis that we are about to face. We are going to be facing difficult times ahead, and this is a prudent budget, a budget that targets resources to those most in need in this time of crisis. And I recommend the Chamber back the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. After that quite a heated discussion there. What I just wanted to say was, I think that we're actually not that far apart. There's lots of good things. The broadband's great. I welcome that. But what we were talking about is you're just handing out money to with a title on it. We're actually talking about targeting it and actually tackling climate change and the cost of living and energy use. So our approach is to actually take a lot of this stuff, but actually target it and actually achieve something out of it rather than just hand out a check for something. That's why I think you should back our proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Provost. Just to come in and listening to Councillor Brisley. Councillor Brisley mentions that she was in an administration back in the 1980s when the miners were on strike, and the administration at that time did everything that they could to help those that are in need. And I'm very proud that we're doing that again in this budget. Councillor Benny, we can talk about things and think about them and plan them and all the rest of it, and we have done. We've taken the time to do it, but at some point you just have to sit and say, if you're hungry, here's some food. If you're cold, here's some heating. And at that point, we'll worry about the details thereafter. You know, that thread, that Labour thread that Margaret or Councillor Brisley referenced, that's gone back decades in Stirling, the Labour thread is alive and well, and the Labour voice is strong within this budget. And I know that people will see this budget and see the Labour voice within it. We've worked in partnership with the SNP group, and we've delivered a budget that delivers for the people in Stirling, but crucially delivers for those who need it most. You know, we've heard a lot of electioning today overall. The Tories' slogan is basically, they've got your bin. We've got your back. If you live in Stirling and you're experiencing poverty, if you're worried about the future, if you're worried about where you're going to get money to heat your house from, your Labour councillors have got your back. Your Tory councillors have got your bin. I'm proud of where we stand in this budget, and I'll be certainly backing the administration budget today.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much. So I remember the 1980s when I was a shop steward, and there was all sorts of community, the poverty and the responses to it. So thank you, Councillor Bresley, for reminding me of that. I think the key thing is a council and communities who support the people who can't really support themselves. And there is great work that goes on in Starling through the food banks, and I think a specific support for people doing a food the initiatives. That's where the people are actually starting to hurt, and that's where we should be. And I'm pleased to support this budget because it does that. That's my main priority, and that should be our main priority. Who are the people who are the suffering the most through the cost of living, etc. And I think this is probably an opportunity to call for the national insurance to, at this late stage, and I note there are quite a few people within the Conservative Party themselves who would back this, and they have done in public kind of forums, to stop that. That would give extra money to the council now, and actually would help to support the poorer people in our communities. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further contributions? 3 of the councillors reserved the right to speak. Do any of them want to speak at this point?
Yeah, I'll speak if no one else does. Oh, sorry.
I've got Councillor Laurie first.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to echo what others have said in thanking the officers for their assistance with this budget. I won't go through it obviously line by line, Councillor Brisley's done that, but we very much tried to consider the best and the most effective use of council funds, and also given the pressures that our residents are facing, to try and assist them in the best way possible. And I think this SNP Labour administration budget has done that. So I'm certainly very happy to second the budget motion.
Thank you. Councillor Errol.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, just a few words. I think there's been some useful comments, some more than others, but anyway, but it's budget day. That's what one usually gets. So I do just want to make, I would hope that we can get away a bit from the old tropisms here on either side. Genuinely, I mean, there are some good things in the administration budget, and we've said so, and we mean it, you know, definitely. I do want us to consider this one-off opportunity that we have. A lot of work went into identifying the reserve budget and items that could be repurposed. Some could argue that that work is overdue. Some could argue that had that been done earlier, we might have been able to mitigate things in past budgets. And I think that's just a comment I'm making on behalf of maybe all councillors. But we have managed to create nearly £2 million of money. On top of that, our thinking was that we can add to that safely while keeping reserves at a sustainable and sensible level for the emergencies that have been talked about, the unforeseens. We should never keep too many reserves. That's never a comfortable position to be in. But by putting these two amounts together, we would create a significant amount of money. And that could do, it's a word I hate, but could be transformational. to be honest with you, on so many fronts for the people of Stirling. It's an opportunity to do some long-term sustainable projects that we could, as Neil said, well researched. And as Scott has said, the work that the officers have done in their budget proposals, the 1.9, is there's no reason why many of these projects and spending that he talked about and there's in their budget could not be done and done quickly. It's not a question about kicking them into the long grass or anything like that. They could still be done. And many of them, I think, have merit and would probably get support across the chamber, I think. So I would just like to maybe just pull us a little bit back from maybe where we were going and just try and suggest that we are wanting to be constructive. We do want to have that engagement, and we do think that as a way of doing things in a slightly broader based and more ambitious way that we could, and that was what our proposal was designed to prompt a conversation about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maturi.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm proud to second the budget motion amendment from it, and likewise I want to thank the officers for the assistance they provided in drafting it from it, and say likewise your agreement with a lot of the administration's motion and a lot of the funds to help mitigate the cost of living crisis. And yeah, likewise, yeah, I'd much preferred to have not raised council tax at all, never mind having to go with the 3.5%, but that was necessary in order to likewise reduce the garden race charge to £0 from that there, and see what likewise we put in money for parks and Dumbrain from that, and seeing revenue funding for the mobile changing prices, which is in our capital budget. I was disappointed to see, after all the fine words we heard at a previous budget meeting, or if you'd come to us earlier, we could have included it in our budget, that no one else has included mobile changing prices in their budgets this time, apart from us from that. So yeah, I think it's the middle way format. It provides the bins format, it provides the mitigation cost of living and increased funding for roads as well. So I would urge people to back the motion amendment. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any further comments before I move to summing up? I don't see any, so I'm going to ask Councillor Benny to sum up for his amendment, please.
Thanks, Provost. We had I think Councillor Farmer's now given that speech 5 times, attacking the callousness and the iterative processes and all the other things that we put on the bingo sheet to see what you say that time, Scott. But the main thing here is that this is not about not doing these things. And if they are as well worked out in the background with papers outlining all this stuff, then actually it can be very quickly brought to a head. Because looking at these, there's 3 or 4 lines explaining what we're spending quite a lot of money on, and I don't really fully understand exactly why we're spending it in that way rather than in other ways, because I could think of 3 or 4 other ways that we could do it as well. And it's that thing about just weighing that up. If that work's being done, that's brilliant, but it's not in this budget. And that's the important thing here. I think that deserves to be open and transparent and shared with members and indeed the public so that they can see how we're spending their money. Councillor Brisley mentioned the help that was given by Stirling Council to the miners in the 1980s, and I should probably declare an interest then, because I probably got some of that help as a 3 or 4 year old, depending on when it was, of a miner's family. My dad worked in the Flynn pit at the time and was on strike, and we did have that. We did suffer because of that. And there is an opportunity for the council to help alleviate suffering. And there is always that opportunity to help alleviate suffering. And it should undertake that. We should do that, which is principally why I don't think we should be sitting with vast reserves. There's genuine hardship, there's genuine need in our community, and we're sitting with reserves £3.6 million above what our normal position of reserve should be. So the broken bridges and the urgent issues is supposed to be taken care of by our 2.5% of reserve. It's supposed to be taken care of within that 2.5%. We're sitting at reserves of 4.5%. We're sitting at reserves with £3.6 million more than we need, than we have said that we need at every opportunity. Nobody has ever come forward and said that we should increase the reserve level to 3 or 4%. It's always been that the reserve level should be 2.5%. It is wrong in a time when there are problems, when there are cost of living crises, when there is genuine need in our community, when we do have an environmental issue coming forward, that we just sit with that money on the hope that somebody will come up with some computer system to buy or something like that. That's not what that money's for. It is there to alleviate suffering and to deal with the problems that we have in our community. And it is wrong for us to be sitting on that. I've said this many times before, that our reserves can be too high. But it is fundamentally wrong at a time when we have this suffering in our community to be sitting on that kind of reserve. And I think we need a robust way and a robust methodology to find ways of spending that which will benefit the people of Stirling. And I think it's wrong that the administration hasn't used that. And that's why I would urge them today to support our amendment, because that will allow for that money to be utilised, to be put to work, to make sure that the people in our district, the people in Stirling, all across Stirling, will get the benefit from it.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Councillor Brisley, would you like to sum up for the motion, please?
Sorry, Provost, I not get a chance to sum up?
Sorry. Yes, Councillor Davis. Sorry about that. Absolutely. Please do.
Just a quick comment. I hear what Councillor Benny was saying about the reserve position, but even in our proposals, the draft 5-year budget positions, which you would have seen, show that next year, 23-24, a shortfall of nearly £7 million. Another £7 million the year after that. 5 million the next year, 5 million the year after. We are facing a financial crisis, and we have to do two things. We have to build up reserves, and we have to grow the economy. And our proposals will help economic growth by improving communications. It's a basic rule of running a country. The first thing you do, you make sure people can get from A to B easily without taking 10-mile detours, and they can communicate. Our broadband in the rural areas is horrendous. Knocking on doors, it's the first thing people complain about. We've also put money in to go back to 2-weekly bin collection. At the moment, my inbox is full of people saying it's 2 months between bin pickups, which is just ridiculous in a modern economy. So we have to grow the economy. Our proposal will help that. Once we grow the economy, then the shortfalls will come down, and people will be attracted to come and live in Stirling, and it'll be a virtuous circle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brisley, would you like to sum up for the motion?
Yes, thank you. I've not really got a lot to say. I don't think this is a spending spree, Councillor Benny, to spend 1.9 million to help those in desperate need as a one-off, most of it as one-off payments, which isn't adding on to next year. Maybe we'll still be in the same position next year that people need that type of help. We're not building it into our base budget. And you mentioned about the projects not worked up. Many of them are already existing. You know, the Scottish Bridging payments there. We're expanding it. The clothing grant is there. We're increasing it. The cost of living support fund, I mean, that isn't there, and neither is the fuel support fund. They're both new, but officers are well versed in knowing the people to target. They already know the people on benefits and receiving the kind of help that would qualify for them for a lot of these supports. The food fund was there last year. The help to the food banks was there last year. We're recognising the desperate need, and people don't want to wait. This is funding that officers can start. They already have systems for most of it. It's going to be relatively simple for most of the things that we've proposed to get the money to people as quickly as possible when they need it, not to wait till the projects are analysed and we get a better idea who might need. They need now. They need the support now. And I'm very, very proud that we are going to help people at the time they need it most, not in a few months' time. Now. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to move to the vote. Julia?
Thank you, Provost. I'm assuming you're happy that I do the vote in the order that the amendments were moved. So I would therefore be starting with Councillor Davies, Councillor Davis's amendment, supported by Councillor Majuri.
Yep.
Okay, so Councillor Davies' amendment. Councillor Benison.
Against.
Councillor Benny.
Against.
Councillor Beryl.
Against.
Councillor Brisley.
Against.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Dodds.
Against.
Councillor Errol.
Against.
Councillor Farmer.
Against.
Councillor Flanagan.
Against.
Councillor Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Houston.
Against.
Councillor Hutchison.
Against.
Councillor Kane.
Against.
Councillor Laurie.
Against.
Councillor McPherson.
Against.
Councillor Majuri.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor McGill.
Against.
Councillor Oxborough.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Tollemache.
Against.
Councillor Tweed.
Against.
So Councillor Davies' amendment falls. We now move on to Councillor Benny's amendment, seconded by Councillor Errol. Councillor Benison.
Against.
Councillor Benny.
For.
Councillor Beryl.
For.
Councillor Brisley.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dodds.
For.
Councillor Errol.
For.
Councillor Farmer.
Against.
Councillor Flanagan.
For.
Councillor Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Houston.
Against.
Councillor Hutchison.
For.
Councillor Kane.
Against.
Councillor Laurie.
Against.
Councillor McPherson.
Against.
Councillor Majuri.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor McGill.
Against.
Okay, here's a down.
I'm so sorry, I'm going to sort something.
Oh well.
So we just say that we won that one, yeah?
I do apologise. Well, seeing this is the last council meeting. So, Councillor McGill against. Councillor Oxborough.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Tollemache.
Against.
And Councillor Tweed.
Against.
Councillor Benny's motion falls. So we move on to the original motion, proposed by Councillor Brisley, seconded by Councillor Laurie. Councillor Benison.
For.
Councillor Benny.
Against.
Councillor Barrow.
Against.
Councillor Brisley.
For.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dodds.
Against.
Councillor Errol.
Against.
Councillor Farmer.
For.
Councillor Flanagan.
Against.
Councillor Gibson.
For.
Councillor Houston.
For.
Councillor Hutchison.
Against.
Councillor Kane.
For.
Councillor Laurie.
For.
Councillor McPherson. Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Majuri.
Against.
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor McGill.
For.
Councillor Oxborough.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Tollemache.
For.
And Councillor Tweed.
For.
The motion is therefore passed. Thank you, Provost, and I do apologise for the musical interlude.
That was all. Right, we will now move to item 4, which is the proposed General Services Capital Programme for 2022-23, report by the Interim Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you, Provost. George Murphy, Interim Chief Officer Finance. This report presents a proposed General Services Capital Programme for financial year 22-23, and it contains recommended spending plans as well as available resources. The report indicates a programme funding surplus of £30,000 and invites proposals to be brought forward to deliver an affordable programme for next year. Officer proposals are contained in Appendix 1, with supporting notes included in Appendix 2. The main source of funding for the core programme, Scottish Government General Capital Grant, was confirmed in the Local Government Finance Settlement announcement in December 2021, with amounts received for 22-23 outlined in the report. Capital grant allocations for the years beyond 22-23 will not be confirmed until after the Scottish Government's Resource Spending Review in May 2022. The report also contains provisional capital estimates for 23-24, together with some limited estimates for 24-25, which mainly relate to education projects which span multiple financial years. It is proposed that the full implications of these projects are brought back to Council in 22-23 for member consideration and decisions. Officers also intend to develop during 22-23 a draft minimum 5-year capital programme, which will set a medium to longer term outlook on the capital investment requirements. Reference is also made within the report to the wide range of projects the Council is currently investing in to drive forward the net zero agenda. The Council is invited to discuss and decide on the proposals already circulated by the administration to achieve a balanced programme for 22-23. Opposition and independent amendments have also been circulated in advance. At this point, myself and other colleagues will be happy to answer any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to the officer? I don't see any questions. Oh, Councillor MacDonald, there is something the matter with your hand mechanism, but I can see it on the camera. So please make your point.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I haven't shut up today, so I'll ask another question. Page 67. I just wondered what was meant by 55 to 61 are all in brackets, as if they've been taken out. Is that right? Just want to understand that.
Page 67. Sorry, can you say that again, Councillor MacDonald?
67, 55 to 61. They're all in negatives. So what does that mean?
55 to 61. I might defer to my colleague. I don't know. Oh, is that the advanced projects? That's the projects coming forward from 21-22. So these were projects that were advanced in 21-22. So obviously because the money is being spent in 21-22, that will reduce the level of funding available in 22-23 within the capital programme.
Okay, that's right. That makes a bit more sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Any further questions to the officer? No, I don't see any. Councillor Brisley, you have a motion.
Yes, I think the officers have prepared a very good assessment, a very good programme for our consideration, and covering our most needed projects. Most of the programme is on schools, etc., roads, IT transformation, but there is a lot of very useful information. And what I always like about what comes forward is one thing that we as a council do, we don't tend to get very parochial as councillors. You know, we tend to, we are accepting the officer's recommendations here. Where they think the money is most needed in terms of capital works, the road improvements, the schools that need repaired. I can't remember ever hearing a big debate and any local member saying, no, it shouldn't be that school, it should be a different one. We've gone along with it normally. I certainly am very happy with what the officers have proposed in terms of the programme. I think hopefully we can deliver it. We can't forget that there have been problems this year in terms of accessing materials. COVID got in the way. There's a whole series of reasons why our capital programme was underspent. I don't think any of us like that. When we set a programme, we hope it will be achieved. And unfortunately, this coming year, a lot of what we had hoped to achieve won't be. So with any luck, next year's programme the situation might improve a good bit. We only have a few amendments to put forward, and amendments to the draft programme, and it's outlined in item 2 of my motion, which is that was the additional prudential borrowing to cover the rural community fibre network. We're putting in additional monies. It's been highlighted that we brought forward what we could into this financial year from projects that would have normally been in the 22-23 capital programme, but we are putting additional monies back in there. And I think, again, for active travel, a cycle route, and I think other than that, I think I would move that we agree the programme, note the programme amendments, note and agree the revised capital spending programme totalling 37.89 million is set out in the appendix, and also that we agree that officers carry out a comprehensive review and bring back the draft capital strategy looking at a longer term outlook in funding priorities, because I think we always like to know what the needs of the capital investment are to satisfy the council's strategic priorities, whatever those priorities might be next year. You know, after the elections, things may change, but I have pleasure in moving the motion, the administration motion on the capital programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Oh, sorry, apologies. Can I just ask Councillor Laurie if she wishes to speak at this point? She's a seconder of this motion.
I'll reserve my right to speak at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benny, would you like to propose your amendment?
Provost, no, I'll be withdrawing my amendment because it's no longer competent, because the revenue budget didn't pass, so therefore we don't have as much money to borrow. I do think that the council has missed an opportunity here to invest additional sums of money. The monies that we were able to find in the revenue programme, especially around about the issue of reducing the amount of budgeted mileage, would have been very good to borrow on the back of that to invest, especially in walking. I thought there was quite a nice symmetry to that. Because many of our pavements and paths, and especially the paths which are not contiguous with roads, never really get touched in our capital programme, and we do underinvest in our pavements and our walking routes. I do think there is something to be said for that. I think the other thing I would say is that the Bannockburn to Cowie cycle route is something that we'd all approve of, but I do think that making money available for another one would be quite useful as well, so that it doesn't kind of descend into the parochial. I would quite like to see one go from Windsor Milton to Stirling through St Ninians. I'm sure Provost and the council leader would also agree with that, as Stirling West councillors too. But it would be good to be able to at least have the discussion around about that, so that we could put in place an additional cycle route to make sure that all areas of Stirling are served by that. But that being said, there's a lot in the capital programme. I don't intend to object to it. I think it is absolutely fine. What's being proposed by the administration is additional stuff. It would have been good to put more in, but as the council hasn't approved my revenue budget, the amount of money that's available is not there. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Councillor Davis, do you wish to proceed with your motion?
Thank you, Provost. Now I'm going to withdraw my motion, but Councillor Majuri has an alternative.
Yes, we have an alternative. So, yeah, likewise, our capital budget can't be funded by the administration's revenue budget, but we have an alternative amendment which the Democratic Services have available, which would be able to be funded by the...
Sorry, can I just be clear, Councillor Majuri? You're putting forward... Councillor Davis has withdrawn his amendment, but you're now putting forward an alternative amendment. Is that right?
Yes, I have an alternative amendment. Yeah.
Right. So we have to know what that amendment is, so that we can...
Point of order, Provost. I would question the competence of an amendment when the time has elapsed for amendments to be submitted.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. This is being a budget meeting. The time has elapsed for an amendment to be put. Julia, can you just confirm that?
Yes, I think you are correct. I think I am due an apology to Councillor Davis and Councillor Majuri, because I think you may have been led to understood that you could introduce an alternative if you could not move your original amendment, but that does not comply with the standing order proposals, the standing order budget proposals. So I'm afraid that's not competent.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the previous was previously indicated we could do that. But yeah, likewise, our original amendment then had additional funding for...
Yes, well, we don't, as this isn't going to be an amendment, I don't think we need to go...
Yeah, it was the original amendment, just sits from those council benefits.
So, in fact,
the chance to fund.
The motion stands, and the proposals are go forward. So now we move to the next item, which is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, 2022-2023. Again, a report by the Interim Chief Finance Officer.
Provost, point of order. You know, do we not have to have a vote on the proposals? I would have thought so.
Yes, yes, Councillor Farmer and Provost, that's why I've got my hand up. We do still need to have a vote on the motion.
Right, let's have our vote.
So we're now voting on Councillor Brisley's motion, seconded by Councillor Laurie. Councillor Benison.
Sorry, Provost. Apologies. Could I raise a point of order then? If nobody's opposing the motion, why doesn't it just go through unanimously? No, nobody's proposed a direct negative, and the amendments have been withdrawn. So there's nothing to vote on, is there? Are we not unanimous?
Just agreed, are we?
I don't know that we are unanimous, are we?
Well, I wouldn't make the assumption that we were all wanting to vote in favour. So I think it is appropriate, Provost, that we do have a vote.
I do agree. I think we should have a vote.
Provost, sorry, point of order. I'd like you to explain if only one motion's been moved. My understanding of the standing orders are that that motion would just go through. Nobody's moved the direct negative. Nobody's moved an amendment. Unless someone is moving the direct negative, I don't see what we're voting on.
Julia, can we have
a member, as they have done recently, could decide that they don't wish to vote. However, I think it's the easiest thing to do to determine if everybody is happy with the motion, rather than ask on a Teams meeting. We really don't have the ability for to easily see through a show of hands. So I think if we could just do this quickly, that would solve the issue.
To have a vote.
Councillor Benison.
Raise a point of order, please.
Yes.
The point that Councillor Benny is making, would seem to be the case. The point was replied to there, saying if a member wanted to vote against or abstain, but that member should signal that by either doing the direct negative. Any member that wants to do that can signal now if that's something they wish to do. And since nobody is signalling that they wish to vote against or not vote, without having a crystal ball in this room, no one is indicating otherwise at this juncture. The opportunity to indicate is now nobody is.
Provost, I'm leaving this up to you. I thought that was the easiest thing to do. In the time that we've discussed this, we could indeed have completed it.
I worried about the legality of this.
Perfectly legal, Provost.
Sorry?
It's perfectly legal to do what's been suggested at the pass by claim.
Right, who said that?
If I could just, Councillor Houston just said that, Provost. I would like to be satisfied that everybody who has the opportunity to vote, given the opportunity to vote or indeed to abstain. You will recall that we did get into a scenario previously when we didn't run a vote, and then it emerged that certain individuals wanted to abstain. However, we have discussed this for so long that I expect that if anyone wished to do otherwise, then they would have made themselves known.
Right. In that case, I take it that there is unanimous agreement that we pass these recommendations.
Agreed.
Are there any dissenting voices? Because if there are, now is the time to show it. No dissenting voices. Right. In that case, we will move to the next item, which is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2022-23 report by the Interim Chief Finance Officer. George.
Thank you, Provost. George Murphy, Interim Chief Officer Finance. This report presents a Treasury Management Strategy for 22-23 prepared in accordance with various codes of practice and legislative requirements. Members should note that although the codes of practice were updated in December 2021, the relevant changes are not required to be formally implemented until financial year 23-24. Officers will therefore work through these changes during the coming year in readiness for full adoption from 23-24. The Treasury Management Strategy in front of you covers two key elements comprising Treasury Management considerations in respect of borrowing and investment strategies, and capital considerations in respect of capital expenditure plans and associated prudential indicators which set the parameters for capital and Treasury management activities. At this point, myself and other colleagues will be happy to answer any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to the officer? No? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to ask about PPI and what we were doing to PFI and PPP schemes and what we were doing to deal with that over time. We could reduce that.
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat that?
PP and PFI schemes, how we were decreasing that liability over time.
Well, we do make a payment every year, essentially. So we make the payment the payment is split between three elements. There's the principal element, the interest element, but also the service element as well. So the service element that goes to basically the provider, you know, so every year we make that payment, and that reduces the liability within the balance sheet, the council's balance sheet. So that's why every year that payment is cut, that liability is coming down. So you'll see that in the final accounts as well. There's a specific note on PFI PPP in the annual accounts that get audited every year, and that specifically states the payments, the total payment that has been made in year, but it also gives a projection of the liabilities, you know, down to when the actual contracts end.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Councillor MacDonald, you were asked if that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions to the officer? There being none, can I ask someone to propose the recommendations on page 99?
Very happy to move the recommendations, Provost. Recommendations 1 to 3.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second, Provost.
Thank you. I'm opening this up to debate. Does anyone wish to make any comments? No. Is there something, Councillor Farmer?
Yeah, just in general, just to thank the George and the finance team for all their work throughout this process. At times, you must have been pulling your hair out, George. What little you have, a bit like me myself. I've just had a haircut, but just to pass on my thanks to you and the team for all your sterling work on finances. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. Am I sensing unanimity across the chamber? Are there any dissenting voices? Speak now, or ever hold your peace. No dissenting voices. In that case, we have agreed the recommendations. And that concludes the business of this meeting. But as this was the last full council meeting in the cycle of meetings of this administration, and before we disband, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of our officers and staff for their hard work over the period of the administration, facing and overcoming many unprecedented challenges to maintain our services to the people of Stirling. I'm grateful and I'm proud of their commitment and their achievements during this difficult time. I would also like to thank elected members for their commitment and participation and perseverance. We have faced many challenges also of remote working, and we've worked very hard over the last 5 years. And despite our different political allegiances, we have worked cooperatively when it was needed, and also from time to time in the chamber, which has made my job a bit easier, although I have to say I think it was getting a little tricky towards the end of this meeting, but I have only used my gavel, I think, twice since I became provost, so that must be a testament to something. So thank you all, and I wish you good luck in your future endeavours, whether in this chamber or indeed beyond. So thank you. Councillor Farmer, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Provost, just to echo your sentiments in terms of thanking staff for their outstanding work over the period of the administration, and my thanks also to colleagues across the chamber, especially during these unprecedented times that we've been going through with COVID. I would also remark that, you know, using the gavel twice, Provost, is also a testimony to you and your stewardship as Provost of this council and as civic head of this council, and my thanks to you for that. I would also like to wish those who are not standing, including yourself, Provost, all the best for the future. And for those that are unsuccessful also in election, I wish them well for their future endeavours, whoever that may be. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Okay, thank you, Provost. I wanted to say a personal thank you to all of the officers and to yourself for your courtesy and your fortitude.
Thank you. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I think both times you used the gavel, it was with me.
I think you're probably right there.
I think I thoroughly deserved it both times as well. So, you know, absolutely.
I'll second that.
I've got to say, I salute the patience of the province for not chucking me out the meetings more often. Quite frankly, I think I sorely tempted her and possibly got her right, almost that close to it, at least once. But no, thank you, Provost, for your hard work chairing the meeting. I know I haven't always made it easy, and I know that elected members across the chamber haven't always made it easy. But then democracy is not an easy thing, and nor should it be. It's about robust debate. We have different points of view, we have different approaches, but I think that the one thing that kind of unites every single one of us in this chamber in terms of our public service is that idea of serving the people of Stirling. Now, we go about it different ways, we have different views on how that should be done, but we all have that same thing at our heart, and we've always got to remember that in terms of the way that we treat each other and speak to each other. Like you, Provost, and like the leader, the council leader, I do want to say thank you to all members of staff for their patience and hard work over the years, in the last 5 years. This has been unprecedented times. These have been very difficult times, and I think, you know, the work that they've done is really kind of shows that spirit of public service is alive and well in Stirling and in Stirling Council especially. I also would like to put on record my thanks to members who are not returning and members who are retiring at this election, including yourself, Provost, but across the chamber. I think it is important that we put on record our thanks to all councillors, whether they're coming back or not, for their service over the last 5 years. Being a councillor isn't an easy job. It's not, you know, I could say it's not a particularly well paid job, but that sounds really bad when you say things like that, but it is not an easy job. You have to balance a huge number of things. And I think that we should all take a moment and thank each other for our work and our hard work. And thank you, Provost, for your chairing of the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tweed.
Thanks, Provost. Just to say, to echo the comments that have been made before, it's been an honour and a privilege to be a councillor for Trossachs and Teeth. I will obviously be stepping down this time, but I look forward to working with all councillors in the future as the MSP, and to those of you that are stepping down, well done. It's been a really difficult 5 years. Everyone has worked so hard, so I'm looking forward to continuing to work for Stirling and to work for those who are here next time round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tweed. Councillor Kane.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, Provost, but if we're all thanking each other, you know, we have to have this as political neutrality around the thing. So I echo everything everybody says, and especially to you, Provost. It is a difficult job chairing, and it's even more difficult in the fact that we've done this for the last 2 years over Teams. I think if we all reflect on, if I think back to what I thought the 5 years after the election were going to be like, you'd have thought I was absolutely off my head and crazy if I'd said that 3 years in, we would depart Viewforth and not be back. And that is where this term has finished up, our final council meeting on Teams. So what a 5 years it has been. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, Councillor MacDonald, did I see your hand? No.
Sorry. I got my thanks in earlier, but I just wanted to thank everyone again and for your time as a provost as well, and all officers and councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that really does conclude our business. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Turn the lights out, Provost.
See you. Bye.